Quaid Azam, Part 31. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Part 32. Afghani's views were astonishingly correct for those times. He advocated nationalism of a linguistic and territorial variety, implying a unity of Hindus and Muslims, with little said about unity amongst Indian Muslims or with Muslims of the other lands. He was not a pan-Islamicist, at least not then, effectively refuting such notions through his writings. There is no happiness except in nationality, he wrote, and there is no nationality except in language. And a language cannot be called a language until it embraces all affairs that those engaged in the manufacture and the trade need for the use in their work, which is perhaps why Afghani advocated the need for a common language so as to bring together the individual tribes and groups into one unified national unit. This was an exception, this was an expression of a specific preference for the linguistic cover, for the linguistics over religious nationalism, the former in Afghani's view being more unifying and more durable. In the human world of the bonds that have been extensive are two. One is unity of the language, of which nationality and national unity consist, and the other is religion. There is no doubt that the unity of language is more durable for survival and the permanence in this world than the unity of religion, since it does not change in a short time in contrast to the latter. He advocated the teaching and learning of the national language, which would then encourage development of the ties to the nation's past and make learning so much more accessible to so many more people than if the teaching was done in a foreign language. Encouragement of a national language is a requisite to national unity and patriotism. Thus, Indians should translate modern knowledge into their own language, especially Urdu. These views were astonishingly current, considering that they were expressed in the mid-19th century. Afghani was also against such religious conservations as were opposed to Western learning. He held that the principles of the Sharia, Islamic law, were in no way against the spread of science and learning. Rather, the opposite. For useful knowledge strengthened religion as it enabled its adherents to come into the wealth, position, and glory. English arts and industries are necessary, but they should be spread through translation into one's own language. Afghani well understood the context of his times, and therefore, rather than emphasizing religious unity, stood for the linguistic unity. His anti-imperialist and anti-British purpose was best served by this approach, an approach that in every sense was the opposite of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's. Muslim reform movements. As with any other religion, when faced by the decline in its appeal, the recourse is often sought in introspection. Post-1857, Islam in India too went through such a process. Contemporaneously with Sayyid Ahmad of Bareilly, there then arose in Bengal religious movement closer to the soil, to the daily life and struggles of Muslim cultivators. The Faraizi movement, the peasant struggles of Dadu Mian and Titu Mir had idioms similar to that of Sayyid Ahmad of Bareilly. For all of those Muslim reformists spoke of the need for a purified Islam. Such reform movements contributed then to a gradual transformation of the Indian Muslim community from an aggregate of believers into a political association. With a will for joint action. Essentially, such movements worked for a rejection of the medieval, Persianized soft Islam in India and a return to the earlier, purer, harder forms of Islam. Besides, in India, a return to the earlier, besides the movements were not of the city halls and the elegant bait hawks or sitting chambers of the ashraf. They went out and preached against the customs that so many Muslims had absorbed from, and began sharing with Hindus. They must not adopt these Hindu ways preached forcefully. The reformist for India could not be like home, it was like a habitat. These religious and social activities of Daddu Mian and Tito Mir in Bengal or Sayyid Ahmed of Bareilly resulted in time the adoption of a sharp-edged, combative communal language. In addition, these movements also dealt a blow to the upper middle class Muslim culture, which by then was already in decline. Poetry, painting, the cultivation of senses, and the urbane nostalgia of gentlemen, whether Muslim or Hindu, for better days, all collapsed when confronted by the harsh exigencies of religious rectitude, just as they had to surrender to the demanding and humiliating realities of straitened economic circumstances post-1857. The cruel whiplashes of time gave birth to the renewed religious fervor